Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I already fucked it up. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going, guys? Sorry, I was distracted, so I didn't start right at 11, but today we are starting a brand new book. Are you guys excited? Have you guys heard of this book or the movie? I heard someone's here. There you go. Hell yeah. I knew you would make it. Oh, thank you. Thank you. As you can see, I have a new look on my avatar. Trust me, it is relevant. Let me see. Okay. Have you guys heard of this book? Have you guys heard of this movie made in 2010? I'm very excited to read this one because I have watched the movie but I've never read the book, so I'm basically going through the book with you all. Yeah. It's a great movie, but however, I would not, if you have not watched it yet, I would tell you guys not Google it, don't find any information on it, don't watch it until I finish reading the book. That's my request for all of you. Do not watch the movie, do not Google anything about the book until I finish reading the book. It is a very selfish request from me. However, if you do want to spoil yourself, if you don't know the story but you want to spoil yourself, feel free to go and watch the movie because it's an amazing movie that I think that everyone should watch it. If you are into like dark shit like me, basically. But thank you, Ando, for making it here. Thank you so much. Oh my god. How's your weekend, Ando? I hope your weekend is great. Don't move. Ah, man. Positioned the bunny so well just now. Okay, stay there. Alright. I'm terrible. So unprofessional. Okay, this one. Yeah, I should see this. Ando, talk in my chat. Because I usually turn off my UI when I'm reading. You have a great weekend? That's good to know. It's very good to know. I have a semi-okay weekend. It's a struggle sometimes. But overall, pretty well. Pretty good. Hope you guys have a really good weekend. Okay. Let me just... Alrighty. I think this is gonna be a great book. It's gonna be like a total change from what I've been reading so far. Hello, morning Twisty. Thank you for helping me with moderating and everything. It's a really interesting story, and I hope that y'all will enjoy it. I love how confident Ando is sitting like right in the middle of that chair. Hell yeah. Ando, do you like my room? I think this is the first time you are in here, right? I love your bar so much. Seriously. I should go there and AFK more. But I'm always AFK in here because, like, the peace and quiet, like the background sound, is very helpful for me to focus on, like, my work and other stuff. I'm gonna be right back in a second. I'm gonna close the blinder. Okay, this will set the mood for the book. Alrighty. We'll just start reading instead of waiting people to come in here. I don't know, sometimes maybe there are like people in here, but the it's definitely not showing for me if there are people actually in here. Like there's only one viewer, but I know that there's at least you, Ando and Twisty in the viewer right now. But okay, anyway, let me take a sip of tea and I shall start in about 20 seconds. Today, we are reading Confessions by Minato Kanae. Chapter 1, The Saint. Once you finish your milk, please put the carton back in the box. Make sure you return it to the space with your number on it and then get back to your desk. It looks like everyone is just about done. Since today is the last day of the school year, we will be marking the end of milk time. Thank you all for participating. I also heard some of you wondering whether the program would be continuing next year, but I can tell you now that it won't. This year, we were designated as a model middle school for the Health Ministry's campaign to promote dairy products. We were asked to have each of you drink a carton of milk every day, and now we are looking forward to the annual school physicals in April to see whether your height and bone mass come in above the national average. Yes, I suppose you could say that we have been using you as guinea pigs. And I'm sure this year wasn't very pleasant for those of you who are lactose intolerant or who simply don't like milk. But the school was randomly selected for the program, and each classroom was supplied with the daily milk cartons and the box to hold them, with cubby holes for your milk carton to identify each of you by seat number. And it is true that we have kept track of who drank the milk and who did not. But why should you be making faces now when you were drinking the milk happily enough a few minutes ago? What's wrong? with being asked to drink a little milk every day. You are about to enter puberty. Your bodies will be growing and changing, and drinking milk helps build strong bones. But how many of you actually drink it at home? And the calcium is good for more than just your bones. You need it for the proper development of your nervous system. Low levels of calcium can make you nervous and jumpy. And it's not just your bodies that are growing and changing. I know what you have been up to. I hear the stories. You, Mr. Watanabe, you grew up in a family that owns an electronics shop, and I know you have figured out how to remove most of the pixelation on adult videos. You have been passing them along to the other boys. You are growing up. Your minds are changing as quickly as your bodies. I know that wasn't the best example, but what I mean is you are entering what we sometimes call the rebellious period. It's a time when boys and girls tend to be touchy, to be hurt or offended by the least little things, and when they are easily influenced by their environment. You begin to imitate everyone and everything around you as you try to figure out who you are. If you are honest, I suspect many of you will recognize these changes in yourself already. You have just seen a good example. Up until a few moments ago, most of you thought of your free milk as a benefit. But now that I've told you that it's an experiment, your feelings about milk have suddenly changed. Am I right? Still, there's nothing too odd about that. It's human nature to change your mind, not just in puberty. In fact, the teachers have been saying that your class is actually a good bit calmer and better behaved than the usual group. Maybe we have the milk to thank for that. But I have something more important I want to tell you today. I want you to know that I will be retiring at the end of the month. No, I'm not moving to a new school. I'm retiring as a teacher, which means that you are the last students I'll ever teach, and I'll remember you for as long as I live. Settle down now. I appreciate your response, especially those of you who actually sounds as though you are sorry to hear that I am leaving. What? Am I resigning because of what happened? Yes, I suppose so. And I would like to take some time today to talk to you about that. Now that I am retiring, I've been thinking again about what it's meant to me to be a teacher. I did not enter this profession for any of the usual reasons, because I myself had a wonderful teacher who changed my life or anything like that. I suppose you could say I became a teacher simply because I grew up in a very poor family. From the time I was little, my parents told me they could never afford to send me to college. And that's it. And that it would be a waste to send a girl anyway. But I suppose that made me want to go all the more. I loved school, and I was a good student. When the time came, I received a scholarship, perhaps because I was so poor, and enrolled in the National University in my hometown. I studied science, my favorite subject, and I started teaching at a cram school even before I graduated. Now, I know you all complain about cram school, having to go right home from regular school day to hurry through supper and run off to more classes that last late into the evening. But I've always thought that you were incredibly lucky to have parents who cared enough to give you that extra opportunity.
At any rate, when I reached my senior year, I decided to forgo graduate school, which might have been my first choice, and get a job as a teacher. I liked the fact that it was a secure career with a stable income. And there was an even bigger factor. The terms of my scholarship required me to repay the tuition money if I did not become a teacher. So without so much as a second thought, I took the test to obtain my license. Now, I know this may cause some of you to question my motives for becoming a teacher. But I can assure you, I have always tried to do the very best job I could. Lots of people fritter away their lives complaining that they were never able to find their true calling. But the truth is that most of us probably don't even have one. So what's wrong then with deciding on the thing that's right in front of you and doing it wholeheartedly? And that's what I did. And I have no regrets. Now, some of you may be wondering why I chose to teach middle school rather than high school. I guess you could say that I wanted to be on the front lines, so to speak. I wanted to teach students who were still in the middle of their compulsory education. High school students have the option of quitting, so their attention can be divided. I wanted to work with students who were still completely committed to their education, who had no other choice, that was as close to a true calling as I could find. It may be hard to believe, but there was a time when I was passionate about this work. Tanaka-san, Ogawa-san, there's nothing particularly funny about that part of my story. I became a teacher in 1998, and my first position on the job training really was at M Middle School. I was there 3 years, then took a leave of absence for a year before coming here to S Middle School. I found I enjoyed being away from the bigger cities in the prefecture, and this has been pleasant, relaxed place to work. This is my 4th year here, so I've worked as a teacher for only 7 years in total. I know you have been curious about M Middle School. Masayoshi Sakuranomi teaches there, and you have probably seen him on TV recently. Please settle down, everyone. Is he that famous? Do I know him? Well, we worked together for 3 years, so I suppose you could say I do. But in those days, he wasn't such a celebrity. They have made him out to be a super teacher, and he's in the news so often that I suspect you know more about him than I do. What's that? You don't know the story, Maekawa-san? Don't you watch TV? Alright, I'll tell you. Sakuranomi was the leader of a gang when he was in middle school, and when he was a sophomore in high school, he assaulted a teacher. He was expelled and left the country, and for the next few years he apparently wandering around the world doing all sorts of dangerous things and getting into trouble. He witnessed war and other violent conflicts, and he lived among people suffering from extreme poverty. From those experiences, he came to realize the error of his ways and regret his violent past. He returned to Japan, passed his high school equivalency test, and entered a prestigious university. After graduating, he became a middle school English teacher. It's said that he chose to teach middle school because he wanted to help students to avoid the kinds of mistakes that he had made when he was at that age. A few years ago, he started spending his evenings in the video game centers and bookstores where students get into trouble after school. He would seek them out one by one, talking to them about self-respect and offering them a chance to start over. He was so persistent that he acquired the nickname Mr. Second Chance. They even made a TV documentary about him. He published books and expanded the scope of his work, trying to reach more students. What's that? You heard all of that on television last week? Well, my apologies to those of you who already know the story. What? You are right. I left out an important point. At the end of last year, when Sakura no Mi was barely 33 years old, his doctor told him he had only a few months left to live. But instead of feeling sorry for himself, he decided to devote his remaining time to his students. So now, they have given him a new nickname, the Saint. You seem to know all about it, Abe-san. What's that? Do I admire Sakura no Mi? Do I want to be like him? Those are tricky questions. I suppose you could say I want to learn from his life, but only the latter half. But I can see what an impression he has made on some of you, and it makes me realize that I may have been an inadequate teacher in certain ways, especially compared to someone with his total dedication. As I said before, when I first became a teacher, I wanted to do the best job I could. If one of my students had a problem, I would ignore my lesson plan and try to get the class to solve it together. If a student ran out of the room even right in the middle of the class, I would go after him. But at some point, I started to realize that no one is perfect. Me, least of all. And when you tell a young person something with all the authority of a teacher, you actually risk amplifying the trouble. I began to feel that there was nothing more self-indulgent and foolish than forcing my opinions on my students. In the end, I worried I was simply condescending to the very people I should have been respecting and trying to help. So, after my leave of absence, when I started to work here at S Middle School, I laid down a couple of new ground rules for myself. First, I decided I would always address my students politely and use san after their names, and second, I would treat them all as equals. This seems like small things, but you'll be surprised how many students notice right away. Notice what, you ask? I suppose they notice how much it made them feel to be treated with respect. You hear so much about abusive families that you might think that all children are being persecuted at home. But the truth is that most children these days are coddled and spoiled. Their parents bow and scrape and beg them to study, to eat their supper, whatever. Which may be why children show so little respect in return. Why they talk to adults in the same tone of voice they use with their friends. And a lot of teachers even play up to this. Consider it a badge of honor to be given a nickname or to be addressed informally by their students in class. That's what they see on TV after all, with all the shows about popular teachers who are buddies to their students. I'm sure you know how the plot goes. A popular teacher has trouble with one particular class, and out of the conflict a deep trust develops between them. And then, when the end credit rolls, the rest of the school and the teachers who other classes have vanished, and it's as though the teacher's there for that one group of troublemakers alone. Even in class, the TV teacher talks about his personal life and delves into the problem students' most intimate feelings. Do the rest of you want to hear all this? Oh yes, of course we do. Then, something serious gathers the courage to ask about the meaning of life. And then, the drivel continues. In the last scene, the serious student usually ends up apologizing to the troublemaker for having been so insensitive, which might be fine for the television, but how about in real life? Have any of you had a personal issue that seemed so pressing that you wanted to interrupt the class to talk about it? There's too great an emphasis placed on the sheep gone astray. Personally, I have more respect for the serious student, the one who never got into trouble in the first place. But those kids never get the starring roles, either on TV or in real life. It's enough to make the well-behaved student doubt the values of his efforts. People often talk about the sense of trust that develops between a teacher and her students. When my students started getting cell phones, I began to receive text messages saying things like, "I want to die," or "I have no reasons to live," cries for help. They often came in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have to admit, I was tempted to ignore them, but of course I never could. That would be betraying our sense of trust. Of course, teachers I also started getting much more malicious messages. A young male teacher got a text asking for his help. The sender said that her friend was in trouble and asked him to come to the entrance of a seedy hotel in the center of the town. Now, you might think he should have been a little bit more cautious, but he was young and earnest, and he hurried off to help, only to be photographed with the girl in the compromising location. Her parents showed up at the school the next day. The police got involved, and it turned into a major incident. His fellow teachers knew, of course, that the poor fellow had simply been tricked, because he had told us that he was a transgender. He had been born with the body of a man, but he was actually a woman. Even under these circumstances, however, we saw no reason to reveal the truth. The young man himself, however, was determined to defend his honor as a teacher, and he ended up telling his students and their parents. But this whole tragedy and the disastrous outcome for the teacher had started from almost nothing. From a student's hurt feelings at having been told to stop talking during class? What? Was the student ever punished? Of course not. On the contrary, the teacher and the school were blamed. How could they expose impressionable young people to sexual deviance or gays or even single mothers like myself? The parents ignored what their own daughter had done and blamed the school, and in the end they won. And though I'm not sure it's ever appropriate to talk about the winners and losers in a situation like this, the teacher? He was transferred last year and teaches at another school now as a woman. I know it's an extreme example, but this kind of accusations get made all the time. And for male teachers, they are very difficult to disprove. Since that incident, we have made it a policy to have a female teacher to go in place of a male teacher when he has to meet with a female student and vice versa. That's also why we have 2 male and 2 female teachers for each grade. If one of you boys were to ask me to meet you somewhere, I would immediately get in touch with Tokura sensei from the A class and ask him to go in my place. And if something happened involving a girl from the A class, Tokura sensei would contact me. You had not realized? There was never an announcement made, but we thought you would figure it out yourself. So now you boys are probably wondering whether it's even worth contacting me when you are really in trouble if Tokura sensei is going to show up anyway. What's that, Hasegawa-san? Yes, I remember you had that problem in gym class. You told me it was quite serious, but in the bigger scheme of things, it was quite minor. In fact, I doubt it's more than a few times a year when one of you really needs me. I'm sure when you text me saying that you want to die, you truly believe on some level that life has no meaning, as you all seem to like to say. And I'm sure that from your own self-absorbed point of view, you feel as though you are all alone in the great wide world, that your troubles are completely overwhelming. But I have to say that I am less interested in catering to your adolescent whims and more concerned that you grow up someday to be people who are capable of considering the feelings of others. For example, the feelings of the person who receives such a thoughtless message in the middle of the night. To be honest, I doubt that anyone who is truly despondent, who was actually considering doing something drastic, would send an email to announce the fact to her teacher. You may have guessed by now that I was never the sort of teacher who thought about her students 24 hours a day. There was someone more important to me. My daughter, Manami. As you know, I was a single mother. Shortly before Manami's father and I were planning to be married, I learned that I was pregnant. We were a little disappointed that it had turned into a shotgun wedding, as they say, but the truth is, we were delighted at the prospect of having a baby. I began getting prenatal care, and we decided that it would make sense for my fiancé to have a physical as well. Quite unexpectedly, the test reveals that he was suffering from a terrible disease, and all talk of the wedding stopped at that point. Because of the illness? Of course, that was the reason. Was it hard for him to accept? I am sure it was, Miss Isaka-san. And of course, some couples go ahead and get married even though one of them is ill. They choose to face the problem together, but what would you do in this situation? What would you do if you found out that your boyfriend or girlfriend was infected with HIV? HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, better known as AIDS. But most of you already know all about this from the novel you read for summer projects. So many of your book reports said that you had cried at the ending that I decided to read it for myself. For the few of you who chose another book, it's about a girl who contracts HIV while working as a prostitute and eventually develops AIDS and dies. What's that? You don't think the story is that simple? You found the woman, the heroine, more sympathetic than I made her sound. I can understand that. But if you sympathize with this girl in the book, why did so many of you push your chairs back when just now, when I told you what happened with my fiancé? If you are so sympathetic to the people with AIDS, why did you move away when you found out that the teacher standing in front of you had sex with someone infected with HIV? You look particularly uncomfortable, Hamasaki-san, sitting there in front row, but there's no need to hold your breath. HIV is not spread through the air. The fact is you can't catch AIDS from most kinds of physical contact. Not from shaking hands, or coughing, or sneezing. Not from the bath, or the swimming pool. Not from sharing dishes, or mosquito bites, or from your pets. In general, not even from kissing. You can't get AIDS from living in close contact with an infected person. No one has ever caught it simply by being in the same class with someone who was infected. Though I know the book didn't mention any of that, and I apologize for keeping you in suspense, but I am not infected either. Don't look so shocked. It's true that sexual intercourse is one way of spreading HIV, but not every act of intercourse results in infection. I was tested during my pregnancy and the results were negative. But because it seemed so hard to believe, I was retested several times. It was only later when I learned the real infection rate from intercourse, and I know why I had escaped. But I won't tell you the figure since I know how easily influenced you are by statistics. If you want to know, you are free to look it up yourselves. My fiancé contracted HIV overseas during a wild period in his life when he hadn't cared much what happened to him. I'm afraid I find it difficult to accept this part of his past. It had been a terrible shock to learn that the man I was planning to marry was infected with HIV, and despite the test, I continued to worry that I was infected too. Even after I was sure that I was safe, I lay awake in the morning. I lay awake at night, worrying about the baby in my belly. While I never stopped respecting my lover, I have to say at times I truly hated him for what he had done. And I suppose he could sense that. He apologized to me repeatedly and pleaded me to go ahead and have the baby, but I have to say that the thought of ending the pregnancy never crossed my mind. Irrespective of politics, it felt like murder to me. I should tell you that my fiancé didn't dissolve into self-pity after learning that he had AIDS. On the contrary, he seemed to feel that he was simply suffering the consequences of his actions, and he was always careful to distinguish between his situation and that the hemophiliacs and others who had contracted the virus through no fault of their own. Still, I cannot imagine the despair he must have been feeling. Eventually, I realized that I had been wrong. Partly because so much I wanted my baby to have a father, and I told him that we should go through with the wedding, that as long as we both understood the situation, we would find a way to face the problem. But he refused quite stubbornly. He was strong-willed, and he was absolutely determined to put the child's happiness above all else. Prejudice against people with HIV is terrible in Japan. If you want proof, just remember how you all held your breath a moment ago when you thought I was infected. Even if the child turned out to be HIV negative, how would she be treated when it was learned that the father had AIDS? If she made friends, would their parents forbid them to play with her? When she was old enough to go to school, would the other children or even the teachers mistreat her and try to force her out of the cafeteria or gym class or anywhere they thought a problem might occur? Of course, a child with no father can also experience prejudice, but the challenges are much less serious and she has much better chance of finally winning acceptance. At any rate, we decided to call off the wedding. I was left to raise our daughter alone. After she was born, Manami was tested and turned out to be HIV negative as well. You cannot imagine how relieved I was. I made up my mind to give her the best care a mother could, to protect her at all costs, and I poured every ounce of my love into her. If you were to ask me which was more important, my students or my daughter, I would have answered without a moment's hesitation that my daughter was far more important. Which was of course only natural. Manami asked me about her father only once. I told her that he was working very hard, so hard he couldn't come and see her. And this was in fact quite true. Having given up the right to call himself Manami's father, he had thrown himself into his work as though the rest of his life depended on it. But his sacrifice was meaningless in the end. Manami is no longer with us. When Manami turned 1, I put her into daycare and returned to teaching. In the city, daycare centers would keep a child until late into the evening, but out here in the countryside, even extended care ends at 6 o'clock. So I consulted a placement service for seniors looking for part-time work and found Mrs. Takinaka, sorry. She lives just behind the school swimming pool. Yes, that's right. The big house with a big black dog named Muku. I'm sure some of you have fed Muku with your leftovers from lunch through the fence. At 4 o'clock when the daycare center closed, Mrs. Takinaka would go and get Manami and keep her for me until I finished work. And the two of them grew very attached to one another. Manami loved Mrs. Takinaka and called her Granny. And she loved Muku too, and was very proud of the fact that she was often given the job of feeding him. This arrangement continued for 3 years, but at the beginning of this year, Mrs. Takinaka fell ill and went into the hospital. Because we had been so close, I felt uncomfortable looking for a replacement simply because she was laid up for a few weeks. So I decided I would get Manami from the daycare center myself until Mrs. Takinaka got well. In general, this worked well enough, since they were willing to keep Manami until 6 o'clock, and I was usually able to wrap things up at school by then. But on Wednesday, our faculty meetings often went later, so on those days, I would get Manami at 4 o'clock and get her to wait for me in the nurse's office. Naito-san, Matsukawa-san, you often played with her while she was there, didn't you? I'm truly grateful to you for that. She loved those afternoons. She told me that you girls said that she looked like her favorite cartoon character, Snuggly Bunny. She couldn't have been more delighted. Please don't cry, girls. Those are happy memories. Manami loved rabbits, and she loved anything that was soft and fluffy. So of course, she was crazy about Snuggly Bunny, though in that she was no different from most of the girls in Japan, even those in high school. Just about everything she owned, her backpack, her hankies, her shoes, even her socks, had this little face printed on it. She would climb up on my lap every morning with her little Snuggly Bunny hairband and ask me to make her look like a bunny. And on weekends, when we went shopping, she would always spot a new sort of Snuggly Bunny product that made her eyes sparkle. About a week before Manami died, we had gone out to the shopping center. There was a Valentine's display with all kinds of chocolates, including a whole selection with especially cute packagings, probably for girls to give to one another instead of to the other boys. Manami was drawn to the display and immediately spotted a Snuggly Bunny shaped bar of white chocolate that came in a Snuggly Bunny shaped fuzzy pouch. Of course, she wanted me to buy it for her, but we had a rule that she could only buy one item when we went shopping, and I already bought her a Snuggly Bunny sweatshirt that day, the pink one she was wearing the day when she died. I told her that she'd get the chocolate bunny next time, and we come shopping and began to lead her away from the candy. Normally, she would have followed me quietly enough, but for some reason that day was different. She sat down on the floor in the middle of the store and began to cry, telling me that she did not want the sweatshirt and I had to buy her the chocolate. But a rule is a rule. I wasn't about to let her to get away with that kind of behavior. I told myself that I would buy it for her another time when I was alone and give it to her on Valentine's Day. I reminded her about our rule and told her that she needed to behave herself. As a mother, I had had to learn that there was a clear difference between loving your child and spoiling her. But just then, Shitamura-san happened to appear from somewhere. You had apparently been watching the whole thing, since you came up and offered your opinion without being asked. You seemed to think that I was being unreasonable to deny Manami something that cost only 700 yen. Fortunately, Manami was embarrassed to have you see her sitting on the floor throwing a tantrum, and she immediately calmed down and stood up. Okay, she said, puffing out those little cheeks, but next time I'm getting it for sure. Then she gave you a smile and a little wave, and we left. Of course, with Manami gone before Valentine's ever came, I regret not buying her that chocolate that day. The faculty meeting ended just before 6 o'clock that day. The school nurses attended the meeting, so their office was empty. But several of you girls were kind enough to look after Manami until the school closed at 6, so she never complained about being bored or lonely, and she was always waiting patiently for me when I got out of the meeting. That day, however, she wasn't in the office. I checked the restroom, but she wasn't there either. It was just as after-school activities were winding up, and it occurred to me that she might have gone to find some of you girls in your club rooms. So I wandered around the school, looking for her, not particularly concerned at that point. I ran into Naito-san and Matsukawa-san, and you told me that you had gone to play with Manami in the nurse's office around 5 o'clock, but she hadn't been there. You had thought she hadn't come to school that day. Then you helped me to look for her. It was dark by then, but there was still a number of people in the school. They all joined the search that evening. Hoshino-san, you were the one who found her after you had finished the baseball practice. You said that you hadn't seen her that day, but that you remembered seeing her once coming from the direction of the pool, and you went there with me to look for her. The gate was chained for the winter, so we climbed the fence. But the chain was loose enough to let someone as small as Manami to slip through. The pool was full, even though swimming classes were over for the year. The water was cloudy and dark. It had been kept in case it was needed to fight fire. We found Manami floating on the surface. We pulled her out as quickly as we could, but her body was icy and her heart had stopped. Still, I continued to call her name and perform CPR. Despite the shock of seeing Manami's body, Hoshino-san went right away to call the other teachers. Manami was transported to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. The cause of death determined to be drowning. Since there were no injuries or any signs that she had been attacked, the police concluded that she had fallen in accidentally. It was already dark when we found Manami, and I was terribly upset, so there was no reason I should have noticed it, but I did remember seeing Muku's nose poking through the fence that separated Mrs. Takenaka's yard from the pool. The police investigation turned up breadcrumbs in that area from the same sort of bread they served at Manami's daycare. Several students testified that they had seen Manami in the vicinity of the pool, and it had become clear that she had been in the habit of going there every week. The neighbors were taking care of Muku while Mrs. Takenaka was in the hospital, but Manami had no way of knowing that. She may have thought that the dog would starve if she didn't bring him the bread. She must have been worried that I would scold her if I found out, so she always went alone and tried to avoid being noticed. According to the students who had seen these little excursions, she was never gone more than 10 minutes or so. Of course, I had no idea of any of this. When I would ask her what she did while she was waiting for me, she would give me a mischievous look and tell me that she has been playing with some of you girls. I realized then I should have then realized that she was hiding something and questioned her more. If I had, she might never have gone to the pool. Manami died because I was supposed to be looking out for her and I wasn't vigilant enough. I'm truly sorry too for the shock it caused everyone here at the school. It's been more than a month now and I still reach out in the futon every morning expecting to find Manami curled up next to me. When we went to sleep at night, she would always push up against me, making sure that we were touching somewhere, and if I pull away to tease her, she would reach out towards me again, and when I relented and took her hand, she would relax and drop off to sleep. I find myself crying now every morning when I reach out and realize I will never again feel her downy cheeks or her soft hair. When I told the principal that I would be resigning, he asked whether it was because of what happened to Manami, which is just what you were wondering earlier, Kitahara-san. And it's true, I have decided to resign because of Manami's death. But it's also true that under other circumstances, I would probably have continued to teach in order to atone for what I had done and to take my mind off my misery. So why am I resigning? Because Manami's death was not an accident. She was murdered by some of the students in this very class. I wonder how much you know about the age limit society imposes on certain things and how you will feel about them. For example, how old do you have to be to buy alcohol and tobacco? Nishio-san? That's right, 20 years old. I'm glad you are aware of these rules. People are legally considered adults when they reach the age of 20, and every year the TV news covers the crop of newly minted citizens as they drink too much and make fools of themselves at New Year's when they celebrate their majority. Now, it may seem odd that these young people are all overindulging right on cue, right at this moment in their lives, and of course, the fact that the TV cameras show up to film them has something to do about it. But it's also true that this whole spectacle would probably never have developed if we didn't have the rule that people aren't allowed to drink until they turn 20. The fact that society permits consumption of alcohol at 20 doesn't mean it actively recommends that its members to drink or get drunk. Nevertheless, the legal age limit for drinking no doubt plays an important role in promoting the notion that you are somehow missing out on something that if you don't drink once, you are old enough to do so, even if you don't particularly feel like drinking in the first place. Still, I suppose the age limit does serve some purpose. Without it, some of you might actually be showing up drunk for class here in the middle school. And I suppose some of you couldn't care less about the law anyway and have already started drinking. Perhaps at the urging of an uncle or an older friend. So I suppose it's too idealistic to think that people can be left to develop their own sense of ethics. But maybe I'm being too vague. Maybe you cannot see what it is that I'm trying to tell you. Or rather, you're so busy wondering who the murderer could be that you cannot think about anything else. You may feel a little afraid to be here in the same room with someone who was capable of this kind of crime. But I suspect it's really your curiosity that got the better of you. I can also tell from the looks on your faces that some of you may have guessed who the murderers are, and some of you actually know. I have to admit, though, that what shocks me is to see the murderers sitting there so calmly while I'm up here saying all this to you. But perhaps shocks isn't quite the right word. I suppose I'm not really shocked at all, because I also know that one of the two murderers actually wanted his name to be known, while the other, the one who went pale for a few minutes ago when I said I knew what they had done, looks as though he's about to faint. But don't worry, I'm not gonna reveal your names now in front of the class. Y'all know something about the juvenile law, don't you? The law was written with the idea that young people are still immature and in the process of becoming adults, so when necessary, the state in place of parents need to find the best way to rehabilitate those who commit crimes. When I was young, this meant that a child under 16 who committed a crime, even if it was a murder, the law was When I was young, this meant that a child under 16 who committed a crime, even if it was a murder, was handed over to family court and usually did not even end up in a juvenile facility. But that view of children as pure and innocent seems outdated now. The juvenile law got turned on its head in the 1990s when 14 and 15 years old began to commit the most horrible crimes on a regular basis. You were just a few years old, but I am sure many of you have heard of the incident in Kobe when a young man, still a child himself, killed several other children, beheading one of them. I'm sure the rest of you would know what I'm talking about if I've mentioned the name of the killer used in the threatening notes he wrote. That case and others like it started a debate about the need to revise the juvenile law, and in April of 2001 a new version was passed, and that includes lowering the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 14. But most of you are 13. What then does age mean exactly? I suspect you remember a more recent incident, the story of poisoning of that whole family last year. The young girl who did it was just your age, 13, and in her first year of middle school. During summer vacation, she started mixing some sort of poison into her family dinner and then writing in her blog about any changes that she noticed in her victims. But it seems that the effects of the poisons were disappointing, so she ended adding potassium cyanide to the curry one evening and killing her parents, her grandmother, and her little brother who was just in 4th grade. You may remember the last line on her blog. Cyanide did the trick! The newspapers and TV were full of this story for weeks. That's right, Sonezaki-san. It was called the lunacy incident. I'm sure you recognize that name. In Roman mythology, Luna referred to the moon or the moon goddess. The word lunacy itself came to mean insanity or psychosis or even foolish behavior. The TV and newspapers picked up on the word, and because she had used it in her blog, and there was speculation that she must have had a split personality. How else would a quiet, serious young girl turn into the insane moon goddess? The whole thing became a media circus, and I suspect some of you know what became of her, what sort of punishment she received, despite the publicity and the fancy name that she received, that was given to the case, because she was a minor, she was never identified and no pictures ever appeared in the press. All we had were exaggerated reports of her crime and vague conjectures about her dark mental state, and the whole thing faded away with the truth completely unknown. But what does that kind of reporting, that sort of public information, seem adequate? All it succeeded in doing was planting knowledge in the existence of this sort of utterly inhumane criminal in the minds of some of our young people, and encouraging that pathetic minority of their peers who already admire or even worships that sort of senseless criminal. Thank you for the claim. If you ask me, if we are going to surpass the names and photographs of underage criminals, we should also prevent publication of flashy aliases they assume to advertise their crimes. She called herself Lunacy on her blog, but since she could only be identified as Miss A in the press, perhaps they should have come up with some sort of humiliating alias for her blog name as well. They could blur over lunacy or replace it with loser or idiot. In the same way, for that beheading case in Kobe, we should have been laughing at the pathetic boy's pretentious use of fancy characters and ridiculous design for signatures in his notes. I wonder what sort of image comes to mind when people try to imagine what a lunacy girl looks like. Think about it for a moment. Would a beautiful young woman call herself lunatic? If the law says you cannot print a picture of an underage murderer, why let people imagine someone pretty? Print a fake picture instead of a hideous, grinning, evil-minded lunatic. Why not show exactly what this sort of human being is like? If we choose instead of to coddle them and make a fuss over them, aren't we just fueling their narcissism? And won't there be more foolish kids out there to idolize them? Above all, when a child commits this sort of crime, isn't it the responsibility of the adult world to handle it as discreetly as possible and make the criminal understand its seriousness in no uncertain terms? The lunacy girl will spend a few years in a juvenile facility somewhere, perhaps write an apology of some sort, and then be released back into the society, knowing she literally got away with murder. You may not know this, but the harshest criticism during that incident wasn't for the girl herself, but for the science teacher at her middle school. I'll call him T, to protect his privacy, because it was well known that T was an unusual, conscientious teacher whose primary concern was his students' academic achievement, and that he had complained more than once that science curriculum was becoming obsessed with safety, to the point where only innocuous, harmless experiments were allowed in the classroom. Do I know him? Actually, I had a chance to talk with him at the National Middle School Science Fair just a few days before the incident became known. The girl told T she had left her notebook in the classroom and asked whether she could go pick it up. He was in the middle of a parent-teacher conference, and since the girl was a good student and well-behaved, he handed her his whole key ring without a second thought. It later came out that she had bought most of the chemicals in her poison cocktails at a local pharmacy or online, but she had gotten the potassium cyanide from school. And T was universally condemned for being too lax in managing such a dangerous substance. It didn't stop there. There were even ugly, false rumors that he tempted the girl, led her on, and he was soon forced out of his job. He's still suffering the effects even through the media attention has died even though the media attention has died down. His wife, who couldn't deal with the endless slander, is in a hospital somewhere for nervous exhaustion. And his little boy has adopted his mother's surname and gone to live with an aunt in another prefecture. Not long after that, a notice went out to all the science teachers from the school board ordering us to make inventories of all controlled and potentially hazardous substances. Strictly speaking, you do not need potassium cyanide in a middle school science lab. And though T might have his reasons for surrendering the keys so easily, and though T might have had his reasons for keeping it around, and I can understand questioning his judgment for surrendering the keys so easily, still, while we don't have potassium cyanide here at our school, we have got a lot of other things that could be used to kill someone. We do keep the keys to the chemical locker in a cupboard the students don't have access to, but if someone were willing to shatter the glass on the door, who could say what might happen? Even if you eliminate every dangerous chemical, you still have the knives in the cafeteria kitchen and the jam ropes out in the field house. Even those could be used to strangle someone. Nor do we teachers have the right to confiscate your property, even if we are quite sure you have a knife. You may bring it with the express purpose of hurting a classmate, and if you simply say you were carrying it to protect yourself from a bully on the way to school, we have no recourse. And if we report our concerns up the line, we are told we should just be more vigilant. Only when your knife causes an accident or is used to hurt someone do we finally have the right to take it away from you, but it's too late by then. And inevitably someone will criticize us for not preventing the tragedy if we knew about the knife. Who is really to blame here? Is it really the fault of negligent teachers? Was Manami's death really my fault? What was I supposed to do? Manami's funeral was private and went as quiet as possible. I know a number of you wanted to attend, but I am sorry that we could not invite you. Part of me wanted to have a large number of you present to say goodbye to her, but I felt even more strongly that it was important to allow her father to be there. They had only met once before at the end of last year. I had not even realized it had happened until I was watching television with Manami one evening and he suddenly pointed at the screen. "I met that man yesterday," she said. I thought my heart was going to stop. When I asked her what she meant, she said that the man had been outside the fence at her preschool, apparently watching her as she played on the swings. He had gotten her attention and waited for her to come over to the fence, so she went. She had been surprised that he knew her name. He asked her whether she was happy. When she said she was, he had smiled and said, "I'm glad," then walked away. I am quite certain that the man was Manami's father. The security at the preschool has been tightened recently, and even residents of the neighborhood check out if they are seen lingering too long outside the fences. Still, Manami's father would hardly have been aroused suspicion. Even if someone had stopped him, he could have made up some sort of excuse, and as soon as he was recognized, he would have been invited right in as a famous teacher. After hearing Manami's story, I started wondering how her father was getting along, and for the first time since we had parted, for the first time in 5 years, I called him. That was when I learned that he finally began to suffer from the symptoms of AIDS, the characters in the book you read fell ill almost immediately, but in reality, the virus often has an incubation period between 5 and 10 years. In his case, it had taken almost 14 years, which is apparently remarkably long. At any rate, I wasn't quite sure what to say when he told me. But before I could answer, he promised in a lifeless voice that he would never try to see Manami again. There was no trace in his tone of the energetic man you see on the TV. I asked if he would like to go away somewhere with Manami and me over the winter break. It wasn't an offer made out of pity for a dying man. I simply wanted to spend time as a real family, but he declined in the same lifeless tone. For the first time he ever hugged Manami was after she was already dead. He came to watch with me after the evening after she died, and he held her and wept and blamed his past sins for what had happened. They say you can only cry until your tears dry up, but that never seemed to happen to us. We found ourselves hoping in vain for an end to the tears and bitterly regretting that we had never made time for the three of us to be together. It seems I have been telling you a great deal about my regrets this afternoon. After the funeral, a great many people came to our house to pay their final respects. Her preschool teachers, classmates, and so many others. We asked them not to bring the traditional condolences money, but they brought snuggly bunny dolls and candy and left those instead in front of Manami's photograph. I'm sure she sleeps easier surrounded by her favorite bunny, or so I tell myself. Mrs. Takenaka came to visit me just last week. As soon as she got out from the hospital, exactly a month after after Manami died, she knelt in front of our household altar and wept and apologized to Manami's spirit. She had read in the local papers that Manami had crept into the pool area to feed a dog, and she was devastated by the sense that she was somehow responsible for Manami's death. Since the incident had occurred on school's property, and because I was so exhausted, I had let the principal check the newspaper story before it was published, rather than doing it myself. But after seeing Mrs. Takenaka, I regretted them. There they are again. More regrets. Mrs. Takenaka had gathered all the things Manami had left at her house, brought them to me in a paper bag, a change of clothes, and underwear, her chopsticks and spoon, stuffed animals, and a few small toys. But among these familiar objects, which were now painful mementos, was one that was not so familiar. A pouch in the shape of a snuggly bunny's head made out of soft velour. It was the one Manami had begged for at the store, the one I had refused to buy her. But what was it doing in Mrs. Takenaka's bag? Manami had always told me when Mrs. Takenaka or anyone else had given her something, even if it was no more than a piece of candy, the pouch, Mrs. Takenaka said, had turned up in Muku's doghouse, which might explain why it was frayed in places. But she had worried that Manami would miss it, so she had brought it to put on the altar despite its condition. I thanked her for the kindness she had shown Manami and for coming to see me before she had fully recovered. Then I drove her home. Muku was playing with a baseball in the overgrown yard. Mrs. Takenaka said that the ball had come from the school, but it struck me as unlikely that even the best batter on the team could have hit a home run that would have cleared the nets and the pool and landed in her yard. She explained that she had sometimes seen students who were cleaning the pool area after school playing catch on the pool deck, and that the ball was probably theirs. The punishment for minor infractions at school was clean-up duty at the pool or the sports shed. I have forgotten that some of you in this very class had received the punishment during the past few months. Was Manami alone in the pool that day? I suddenly began to have my doubts. Back home, I took a closer look at the Snuggly Bunny pouch. Had it really belonged to Manami? If so, who had bought it for her? As I held it in my hand, I realized it was oddly heavy. Unzipping it, I discovered what seemed to be a metal coil visible under the thin cloth of the lining. Fighting back a horrible suspicion, I went to school the next day and brought in 2 students for separate interviews. From the noise in the hall, it sounds as though the other classes have let out. If any of you have club activities or have to go to cram school or simply want to leave, please do so. I know this has been an unpleasant experience and I've gone on a long while now. What I have to say from here on out is even more unpleasant. So if you don't want to hear, please leave. No one? Then, I take it that to mean that you are all staying of your own free will. I'll call the 2 killers A and B from here on. There was nothing in particular that drew my attention to A in the first months when he was here at school. Apparently he had managed to impress some of the boys in his class, but I didn't know that. And I didn't notice him until after the midterm exams during the first quarter. He scored a perfect 100%, and since he was the only one in the entire grade to do so, his scores became known not just to those of you in his homeroom, but to the other classes as well. I know that the most of you were proud of him, but I found out that there was some grumbling in those other classes. A comment made by another child, let's call him C, was reported back to me. C had apparently gone to the elementary school with A, and he said that A had an unfair advantage since he was doing live experiments. I was disturbed to hear this, so I asked C to come talk to me in the science room. Before he agreed to tell me what he knew, he insisted that I tell no one else. Then, he described A's activities during the last year of elementary school. He know how he had gathered stray cats and dogs from the neighborhood and used a device he invented and dubbed the execution machine. He had tortured and finally killed the animals. At first, C had spoken quietly, looking down at his desk. But as he talked, he got more and more excited. He took pictures of the dead animals and posted them on his website, he concluded, as if describing his own exploits, and I remember shuddering to see how much he admired what A had done. I had him tell me A's website address before he left and went straight to the computer in the teacher's office to have a look. There was nothing there but a message forbidding font saying that a new machine is currently in development. There had not been nothing about any of this in the files that were sent over the elementary school when A started here, but I took over the precaution of phoning his 6th grade home teacher. No. Thank you. Spaceship is here. Thank you. Yes, I often forget. And also bit, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. As long as you get in here. And sorry that I'm not stopping, because
I want to try to not stop too much. No, I never heard anything like that. He was a serious student and his grades were excellent, he said, apparently unconcerned by my call. In the weeks followed, I kept my eye on A, but he was, as I had been told, a serious boy who seemed to have good attitude towards school and life in general. All in all, a model student, and before long I went back to paying very little attention to him. You can call me naive, but I suppose I had my hands full elsewhere. One day, toward the middle of last June, I was alone in the science lab preparing an experiment for the ninth grade class. When A came to see me, he examined the ninth grade class when he examined the lab equipment with apparent interest, and then he asked me what I had studied in college. When I told him I majored in chemistry, he asked how much I knew about electrical devices. I've done courses in physics as well, but remembering A's father's owned an electronic shop, I told him that I doubted I knew as much as he did. At this point, he suddenly held out a small black imitation leather coin purse with a zipper. It looked perfectly innocent. The type of thing you could buy anywhere. I wondered what he wanted me to do with it, and when I looked up, he was leering at me. "Open it," he said. "There's a surprise inside." I knew it was a trick of some sort, and I took it from him very carefully. It seemed a bit heavy for its size, and I was sure there must be, in fact, to be something inside. Telling myself,
Stretch!
"Thank you." Okay. Telling myself I wasn't going to be shocked by a frog or a spider, I gripped the tab on the zipper. But as I did, a strong shock went through my fingers. For a moment, I thought it was a static electricity, but I quickly realized that it was unlikely on a rainy day in June. As I stood looking at the pulse on my fingers, A spoke up. "Pretty amazing, isn't it? It took me more than 3 months to make." He sounded proud of himself. Still, the shock wasn't as strong as I thought it would be. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You mean you are using me as your guinea pig? What's the big deal?" he said, still grinning and as calm as ever. "Don't people take drugs or get shocked all the time for chemistry and biology experiments? As long as you control the amount." I remembered what C had told me, and that A's website said that his new machine was under development. "Why are you making dangerous things like this?" I asked him. "What are you planning to do with it? Kill small animals?" My fingers were still tingling from the shock. A made an exaggerated show of being surprised, like a comedian miming astonishment. "Why do we have to be so touchy?" he said. "I can't believe you don't see how great this is. Just forget it. I'll show it to someone else, someone who will appreciate it." He snatched the purse out of my hand and left. At the faculty meeting that week, I reported that A had made a purse with an electrified zipper and explained how dangerous it could be, and I had relayed what C had told me about A's activities in elementary school, but they seemed to think that I was talking about something equivalent to a static shock, and the principal just said to give him a stern warning and be vigilant. I also called A's house to talk with his parents, not to accuse A, but to let them know about his experiments could be dangerous, and asked them to keep an eye on his activities. His mother didn't take kindly to the call. "I am impressed you have so much free time to be calling me about this," she said, her voice dripping with irony, "especially when you have got your own child to look after." I started to check A's website daily. I was sure when he had said that he had showed it to someone else, what he had really meant
was that he had posted it there, but the site continued to say that the device was under development. The next week, A showed up again with a purse and a thick file and a paper which he wanted me to sign. It turned out to be an entry form for the National Middle School Science Fair, the one advertised in the poster at the back of the room. The deadline was end of June. Since the projects were due before summer vacation, I had simply mentioned the competition briefly in the class. It had never occurred to me that A would want to enter his purse. In the blank for the title, he had written, Theft Prevention Shocking Coin Purse, under objectives, to protect my precious allowances from thieves. The blanks were filled in except for the name and signature of the project advisor. From the project design section of the entry materials in the file, I could see that he had added a safety catch to the purse that would allow the owner to handle it while anyone else trying to open the zipper would be shocked. There was also a detailed explanation of the design and manufacturing process with elaborated illustrations. At the end, he had written about the remaining problems, primarily the fact that the purse would only deliver a single shock. He proposed to continue working on the design as he developed a college-level specialized knowledge, and he concluded that with what I took to be an intentionally childish flourish, I'll keep trying to improve my invention until even my grandmother can use it with a peace of mind. The application was written out by hand. Though I knew A had a computer at home, I could see that it had been carefully calculated to suggest the earnest efforts of a middle school boy. I know you didn't really want to help me with it, A said, after I had a quick look at the application. But I have to have someone sign it, and you are my homeroom teacher and you teach science, please? When I hesitated looking down at the entry form, he went on. I made it for all the right reasons. I just want to protect kids' stuff. But you say it's dangerous. Why don't we let the experts decide who's right? It sounded like a challenge, almost a declaration of war. In the end, he won, and I lost. The Theft Prevention Shocking Coin Purse received the Governor's Award at the prefectural level and went on to the national competition. There, it was lavishly praised and took honorable mentions. In the middle school division, the equivalent of third place in the whole country. I called A to the science lab to find out the truth about Manami's death. At the time, I thought I could actually accomplish something by doing this. I suppose I was trying to deal with my own feeling of guilt. He came around noon. After a half day of school with an innocent grin on his face, I held out the snuggly bunny pouch. Open it. There's a surprise inside, I told him, repeating his invitation to me, but of course he refused to touch it. A shame, really. I had made my own improvement, increasing the power to the level of a stun gun. It wasn't difficult to do. With a little research, anyone could make something like this. The real question is why anyone would want to. When he realized why I had called him, he began telling the whole tale in a tone that almost triumphant, as though he had been waiting for this day all along. The coin purse that he had taken to the science fair was, as I suspected, the prototype of his execution machine. When he finished the first model, he had tried out on his video game friends. They had been impressed, but not enough to satisfy A. He wasn't showing them the jack-in-the-box. They were incapable of understanding what he had accomplished. So, he decided to show it to someone who could appreciate it. That's when he brought it to me. My reaction did satisfy him, but that was an misunderstanding on his part. It wasn't the purse that had frightened me, but A himself. The whole way of looking at the world. But he was convinced The purse had scared me and intentionally provoked me before he left, thinking I would spread the word about his dangerous invention to the other teachers and his classmates. He was mistaken again. I did report the incident as I have said, but no one else seems the least bit interested. It occurred to A, of course, that he could present his invention on his website, but he was afraid no one would understand it, so he decided to take it to the people who could properly appreciate it. That's how it came to be entered in the science fair. The judges were mostly professors with impressive titles from technical universities, and A fully expected these experts to be appalled by his lethal entry and to label him and him a menace. In this way, he would have attracted the attention that he desperately wanted. But he had not wanted his project to be rejected on the grounds in the local preliminary rounds, so he crafted the accompanying materials to suggest a childish, that is age-appropriate sense of justice motivated the booby-trap first. But he had apparently done his jobs too well, and both he and his inventions were seen as perfectly wholesome through the national levels. One of the judges at the national level, a well-known professor who had appeared on TV quiz shows, came up to A as he was standing by his exhibit in the hall and told him how impressed he was. "I couldn't have put together something like that myself," he apparently told him. The crime-stopping shocking purse had attracted attention as something a bit different in the sea of robot helpers of one sort or another. But A misunderstood again. He thought he was being praised for his technical skills. An understandable misapprehension for a child to have. He still wasn't being recognized for the dangerous villain he wanted to be, but he took some satisfaction in being interviewed by the local newspapers. When I saw his picture and read about his success, I was somewhat relieved myself. I felt that he had only wanted a little recognition and attention, and now that he had gotten it, he might develop in a more positive direction. I decided that I had been unnecessarily concerned and that everything had worked out in the end. One day last summer, the local newspaper printed a long article about A's project and the science fair. But the same day, the lunacy incident broke and the front pages were filled with the story. In the days that followed, the TV and the weekly magazines talked about almost nothing else. A's achievement was acknowledged in front of the whole school at the opening ceremony for the second quarter, but the fact that he had been praised by the famous professor and that newspaper had written about him was hardly mentioned. The lunacy incident was all anyone could talk about. What did A care that they had good things about him? No one had even noticed. What was so great about the lunacy thing? Potassium cyanide? It wasn't as though she had discovered it. Why, who couldn't use a deadly poison to kill people? A had invented his own murder weapon. Shouldn't that get a lot more attention? But the more media made the fuss over lunacy, the more jealous A became, and the more he threw himself into developing his execution machine. I'm going to take a short break. 2 minutes, please. Thank you for staying with me. And we shall continue. From the first time he entered school, B was a friendly, sociable child. He was pleasant and mild-mannered, exactly what one might expect from someone who had been carefully raised by his parents and two sisters, who were quite a bit older. When I finished my interview with A, I called B to try to get him to meet me at the pool. Of course, from the meeting place itself, he must have guessed my intention, and I was asked to come to his home instead. When I arrived, B said he wanted his mother to join us. She seemed surprised by my sudden appearance, from which I guessed that she had no idea what her son had done. I agreed that she could be present, and we began talking about B's experiences since he had first started middle school. He had joined the tennis club during his first quarter. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Where did I stop? He had joined tennis club during the first quarter. He had been interested in trying a sport. Tennis had struck him as cool. But once the club had started, he discovered that it was already unfairly stratified. The kids who had been playing tennis in elementary school were almost immediately allowed sorry allowed to play on the courts, but those who had never played were regulated to a course of fitness training. And even after several weeks had gone by, they still had never so much as touched a racket. B was in the latter group, but since it included more than half the kids, he hadn't been particularly upset. After a couple of months of practice, he was allowed to actually play, and he had started to like the way he looked carrying the racket case back and forth to school. At the start of the summer vacation, their coach, Mr. Tokura, divided them into skill groups. Again, posted a practice regime for each. The group included offensive skills, defensive skills, and the like. And B... Oh, Arum. Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you. Have a seat, have a seat, have a seat. Go sit with them. Offensive skills, defensive skills, and the like. But B found himself once again grouped with the kids assigned to work on fitness skills. Worse still, while each of the other groups had 6 members, there were just 2 others in B's fitness group. D, who stopped coming to practice almost immediately after the groups were posted, and E, a small, slender, pale boy who was known by the unflattering nickname Kathy. Day after day, B and Katie ran laps around the school, convinced that his own level of fitness was no worse than the kids in the other groups. B felt himself growing more and more frustrated. One day, a girl from another club asked him why he was running all the time if he was in the tennis club. Thoroughly humiliated, B went to Coach Tokura and asked to be moved to another group. The coach asked him whether he objected to running itself or to be seen running with Kathy. It was of course the latter. But B couldn't tell the coach how he felt. If you're always worrying about what other people think, you will never get any tougher. Stick it out. Oh, Ando, you're back. Ando, come sit here so I can take a picture.
Go join them. If you are always worrying about what other people think, you will never get any tougher. Stick it out, the coach told him. We'll be finishing group practices in another week. But the next day, B's mother phoned the school to say that he's quitting tennis. And soon after that, he started attending an extremely competitive cram school all the way in town. B's grade had never been better than simply average, but by the time we started the school's second quarter, he had moved quite a bit higher in his class ranking. His scores on the midterms were nearly 50 points higher than those in the first quarter, and in the cram school as well, where the levels were divided by class standing. In 2 months he had jumped from the lowest class, class 5, to class 2, second from the top. F, whose grades were roughly about the same as B, started to go to the same cram school in November. F started in class 4. Puberty is a time when a child's abilities, whether in academics or sports or the arts, may suddenly begin to develop at a rapid pace. Seeing these successes, the child may then develop a certain self-confidence in that field, which in turn encourages increased effort and increased success. Of course, it also happens in many cases that the child overestimated his abilities, or like an athlete who encounters a slump. The child often develops rapidly only to reach a plateau where the rate of increase tapers off drastically. It's what happened next that really matters. Some children, convinced that they have reached the full extent of their abilities, stop trying and allow themselves to follow a downward curve to mediocrity. Others calmly continue to make the effort, regardless of results, and manage to maintain themselves at that level. But still, others dig in and overcome the obstacle, eventually manage to move up to the next level. Those of us who serve as homeroom teachers for students preparing for the high school entrance exam are used to hearing parents telling us that their child could succeed if he would just try. But more often than not, the child that they are speaking of has reached this juncture and followed the downward curve. It's not so much that he hasn't tried. He's simply no longer even in the game. B too arrived at this moment in his development. By the time we were ready to go on the winter break, his grades were no longer improving and had even begun to go down a bit. At the start of the third quarter, he was subjected to a pep talk by his cram school teacher in front of a whole class, something right out of a TV commercial. You let yourself celebrate way too soon, and a few A's and you started to relax, and it's right back to the old B's and C's. B found the whole experience humiliating. What right did the man have to belittle him in front of everybody just because his grades had gone down a little bit? But that wasn't the worst of it. When the teacher announced the new class assignment, B was still in the second level, while F had moved up to the top group. He was furious, and when the lessons were over the afternoon, he went straight to the game center to work off his anger and spend the money he had received from the New Year's. He was completely absorbed in the game when he suddenly realized he was surrounded by a group of high school students. They tried to take his wallet. He resisted. When a patrol officer happened by and noticed the scuffle, he was taken into protective custody. As I remember it, the police called my house that night sometime after 11 o'clock. I immediately called Mr. Tokura, the tennis coach. No doubt, B was shocked to see him show up instead of me, his homeroom teacher and advisor. He asked Tokura why I hadn't come, and was apparently told that it was because I was a woman.
B took this to mean that my situation at home made it impossible for me to be there for him. He assumed I couldn't come because I'm a single mother and my own child took priority over my students. In the car, over the way back to on the way back to B's home, Mr. Tokura apparently continued the criticism of B that he had begun during tennis practice. So, the cram school teacher embarrassed you in front of the class and you went off to the game center. You worry too much about what other people think. When you get out of school, you ain't going to learn to put up with a lot worse than a little scolding. B's reaction that the coach had verbally abused him was typically childish. But I was impressed by the way Mr. Tokura sized up the situation and offered B the appropriate advice. As he was telling his story there in the living room, B's mother has been sighing and murmuring sympathetically about his trials and tribulations of her poor boy. I couldn't help but feeling disgusted by her stupidity. But I also found myself becoming terribly jealous that she still had a child upon whom to pour all this misplaced affection. At any rate, though B had been, in some sense, of victim in this case, our school strictly forbids students to go to the game center under any circumstances. As a punishment for his infraction, B was assigned to clean the pool deck and changing room after school for a week. At the beginning of February, A succeeded in tripling the voltage flowing to the zipper, and he was anxious to test it out. Around the same time, he noticed B, who sat next to him in class, been scribbling "Die, die, die" in his notebook. He stopped B after school one day and asked whether he wanted to see a sex tape he managed to get hold of. B heard about A's tape and immediately agreed. Very soon after the two boys began spending time together, A asked whether B had anyone he wanted to punish. B was naturally a bit puzzled, but A explained about his coin purse and the fact that he had managed to increase its power. "I invented the thing to punish bad guys, so we need a bad guy to try it out on." B knew about the purse, of course, and about A's success at the science fair. He had been impressed, like everyone else in this class. But now, he was given a chance to see how it worked. He mentioned the first name that came to mind, Mr. Tokura. I rejected the idea out of hand, however, showing what a coward he actually was. He would never act without hiding behind his invention. He refused to take on someone as strong as Tokura. B suggested me next, apparently out of lingering anger over my having sent his tennis coach to the police station instead of going myself. A rejected this idea too, no doubt realizing that I wasn't likely to be fooled twice by his little toy. But even worse, he knew that I wasn't going to make a fuss over it under any circumstances, which is, of course, exactly what he wanted. At that point, B remembered that he had seen Manami by the pool where he had been cleaning the deck. "What about Moriguchi's daughter?" he asked. Finally, A agreed. He knew I had been bringing Manami to school on Wednesday afternoons. B added important details that Manami was coming to the pool by herself to feed the dog, that she had pestered me for a Snuggly Bunny pouch in the mall, but that I had refused to buy it for her. The mention of the pouch got A's attention. The next Wednesday, when the school had let out, A and B hid in the locker room by the pool and waited for Manami. They saw her come out on the pool deck, produce a piece of bread from under her jacket, and feed it to Muku through the fence. The boys approached her from behind and B spoke first. "Hello," he said. "You're Manami, aren't you? We are in your mother's class, and we ran into you at the Happy Town the other day." Manami was cautious at first. A realized that she might be worried that they would tell me they had seen her at the pool, and he spoke to her in a soothing voice. "Do you like dogs? Well, so do we. That's why we come here sometimes to feed the pup." When Manami heard that the big boys were coming to feed Mukutu, she relaxed and dropped her guard, and at that moment, A produced a snuggly bunny pouch he had hidden behind his back. Your mama didn't get this for you, did she? Or did she get it for you later? Manami shook her head. The truth is, she asked us to go and buy it for you. So here it is, an early Valentine present from your mother. A reached out and put the strap of the pouch around her neck. Manami seemed elated at the gift. Go ahead and open it, A added. There's chocolate inside. At the instant her hand touched the zipper, Manami collapsed to the ground and lay motionless. A satisfied smile spread over A's face. B was in the state of shock, unable to believe what he had just seen. Gotcha, he heard A whisper. What happened? He asked. His voice was breaking as he grabbed Ab's shoulder. What have you done? She's not moving. Then go and tell someone. Tell everyone, A said. He brushed B's hand aside and walked away with a satisfied look on his face. Left alone, B became convinced that Manami was dead. But he was shaking with fear and couldn't bring himself to look at her body. He found himself staring instead into the eyes of the snuggly bunny, whose head formed a fatal pouch. If they found out that the thing had killed her, then they would have found out he was an accomplice to the murder. Averting his eyes, he pulled the pouch from Manami's neck and threw it over the fence as far as he could. Then he thought of a plan. He could make it look as though she had fallen into the pool. He picked up Manami's body and threw it into the cold, dark water. Then he ran as far as his legs could carry him. As he came to the end of his story, B added that he barely remembered the events he has been describing due to the shock he had experienced at that time. But he felt that he had been honest with me, that he had told the truth. So this was how Manami really died. A and B continued to come to school despite the fact that I now knew the truth. They saw no signs that the police were about to appear in our classroom. A wondered about this. In fact, when he finished his confession, with all that almost ecstatic look on his face, he asked me as much. Why hadn't I reported my suspicions to the authorities? But I told him that nothing had changed, that it would still be regarded as an accident, and I had no intention of turning it into the kind of sensational murder he wanted it to be. Then there was B's mother, who had listened to her son's confession with a blank, dumbfounded look on her face. I told her that as a mother, I wanted to kill both A and B. But I added, I am also a teacher, and though I recognize my duty to report these crimes and make sure they receive the appropriate punishment, I had a teacher's duty to protect my students. Since the police had determined Manami's death to be an accident, I told her I had no intention of reopening the case and stirring up trouble. You can imagine that it was a rather noble little speech. I went home, but after a short time later, there was a call from B's father, who had heard the whole story when he returned from work. He wanted to discuss some sort of monetary compensation, what they call solation, but I wouldn't hear of it. If I took money from his family, B would feel that the whole thing had been put to rest, but I want him to reflect on what he has done and to lead a better life from here on without ever forgetting his crime. And his father finds it necessary to be around a bit more support his son when his past is weighing heavily on him. Well, all the better. Now, that is a reasonable question. How do I justify letting them go free when it's possible A might kill again? You certainly have been paying attention. I suppose it's a skill you learn from your computer games. Though, I have to admit it was hard for me to understand why you got so frantic when I was talking about HIV. You can listen to the story of a murder without even getting upset. But you misunderstand when you worry about A killing again. You see, he didn't kill Manami in the first place. B did. That night, after Mrs. Takenaka left, I came back to the school, measured the voltage in the pouch. Without going into details, I found was that the purse was incapable of stopping the heart of an old person with coronary disease, or even of a 4-year-old child. I tested it on myself, and I can assure you that the shock was far less painful than the one I had touched on the frayed cord on my washing machine. I am convinced that Manami was just unconscious. As I said earlier, the cause of Manami's death was drowning. The next day, when it was reported that he was found in the pool, A went to B and asked him why he had butted in and then done something so unnecessary. I suppose I wanted to ask B the same thing, though for different reasons. Even if he couldn't bring himself to get help for her, why didn't he just run away? If he had, Manami would still be alive. I don't want to be a saint. I'm not being noble by keeping the identity of A and B a secret. I haven't told the police because I simply don't trust the law to punish them. A fully intended to kill Manami but didn't actually cause her death, while B had no desire to kill her but brought about her death. If I did hand them over to the police, they probably wouldn't even be sentenced to a juvenile institution. They'd be let out on probation and the whole thing would be forgotten. I wish I could electrocute A, drown B like he did to my daughter, but neither punishment would bring back Manami. Nor would they be able to repent for their crimes. If they were already dead, I wanted them to understand the value, the terrible weight of human life. And once they understood, I wanted them to fully realize the consequences of what they had done and to live with that realization. So how was I supposed to accomplish this? I know someone who lives with this kind of weight on his shoulders. He provided me with some inspiration. If you remember, this whole discussion started with the idea of calcium deficiency. But calcium isn't the only thing we lack. In the past, Japanese people had a refined sense of taste, but these days it's said that more and more children cannot even tell the difference between hot and mild curry. A problem supposedly caused by a zinc deficiency. So, I wonder about all of you, how sensitive are your tongues? A and B specifically, their tongues. It looks as though you all finished your milk. But did you notice an odd flavor? Perhaps a bit like iron? You see, I added some blood into the carton that went into A and B's this morning. Oh, not my blood. The blood of the most noble man I know. Manami's father, Saint Sakura no Mi. I can see from your reactions that most of you have figured it out. I'm not sure how quickly my little experiment will take effect, but I would like to urge A and B to have their blood tested in a few months. The incubation period for the HIV virus is usually between 5 and 10 years, so that should give you plenty of time to think about the value of life. It's my hope that you'll come to understand what a terrible thing you have done, and that you'll beg forgiveness from Manami's spirit. As for the rest of you, you'll be continuing on together as a class next year, so I expect you to look out for these two and take special care of them. I doubt you'll be sending your new teacher any of those frivolous text messages about the value of living. I haven't decided yet what I'll be doing next. The truth is, I may not have the freedom to decide after today. But if something is to happen to me, I only hope that it will be delayed long enough for me to see the results of what I have done. What's that? What if the results never appear? Well then, I suggest A and B watching out for swerving cars. I'm hoping to spend spring break with Manami's father. We've been living together since the accident. And though he doesn't have much time left, we have decided to spend it peacefully together. I hope you have a productive and pleasant vacation. And I want to thank you for the past year. Class is dismissed.
And that is the end of chapter 1, The Saint of Confessions by Minato Kanae. Perfect timing for a full chapter, 2 hours. Hell yes, this is good writing, girl. Oh my god. Wow. I know that Ando has been here since the beginning. Ando, what do you think about the story so far? Everyone else, what do you all think about the story? Oh my god, I don't think you should be celebrating after such a terrible incident. Have you guys watched the movie before? If not, if you guys have not watched the movie, I suggest that all of you do not watch it until I finish the book. Or, I mean, if you don't mind spoilers, go ahead and watch it. It's a great movie. It's an incredible movie. It's made in 2010, but it's... Yes! That's basically why I chose the story. I wanted something different from usual. I can't be talking about cats, reading about cats all the time, right? But yes, thank you, like seriously, thank you so much for hanging out with me as usual. Sorry, I didn't take some pictures. So cute. You guys are so cute. Oh my god. I love Arum's duck, man. It's the best. Alright, there you go. Maggie. If you guys have not watched the movie, I would recommend watching it after I finish the story. But if you guys don't mind spoilers, go ahead and watch it. Oh, Ando is back! Come on! Get a seat. I'll take a picture. Yeah. Hell yeah. Okay, yeah, I was waiting for you to get the... Oh my god, the duck is at the right place. Cute. So cute. Everyone's so cute. Hang on. Let me... 1, 2... Hell yeah! Okay. Aw, it's okay, B. You always have the VOD to listen to the beginning of the story. How do you like it so far, Bit? it's I chose a very very different tone, so I made my room a bit darker and spoopy. Don't worry about it. Don't have to be sorry for being late. It's just a book reading thing. You can always watch the VODs after this. It's a very good story. It's an incredibly good story. And once, if you guys are interested, go ahead and watch the movie. But yeah, the book came out first in 2008, and the movie is made in 2010 by one of my favorite directors. He also made Kamikaze Girls, uh, which is also based on a novel, but I couldn't really find the novel for Kamikaze Girls. Um, if you don't mind spoilers, Arun, go ahead and watch it. Yeah, if you don't mind spoilers, go ahead and watch it. It's fine because the book will definitely have a lot more details from what I have experienced right now. I watched the movie first, then now I'm reading the book. The book has a lot more details than the movie, but essentially it has the same storyline, basically. So watch the movie if you really don't mind spoilers. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely there's so much details in the in the so you guys understand why I got this bunny out, right? Yeah. Thank you so much for coming here, Maggie. Yeah. Oh, you're gonna go watch Thor? I heard that it's really good. Go have fun. Go have fun. Go have fun. Go be a real life sociable person. Have fun. I heard that it's really funny and good. Yeah. Anything that Waititi made is really good. Yeah, watch. Yeah, bit. Start from the beginning, then you'll understand more. Because I think when you came in, a lot of things already happened. So yeah, I'm doing things a bit different this time. I picked a very dark book. I bought a few books, but most of them like touch a lot on like social problems or mental health problem and all that. And then there are like cats and everything. Or very classic stuff like I Am a Cat by Natsume Soseki, or Kazuo Ishiguro's first novel, which is very tame compared to his later stuff. But I decided to go with something a bit darker when I watched the movie, and I realized that it came from a novel, and I was like, I need to buy this novel right now. And when I bought it, the first thing that came to my mind is I have to read this for Noodibles, because that would make complete sense to give a little bit different a bit of variety of like books to read for Noodibles, definitely. Yeah, and I'm really really liking the way it's written so far, and for its first chapter to end and be like to end at sharply at 2 hours. Oh my god, that's like seriously so fucking awesome. I love it. I love how it just ends sharp at 2 hours when I start reading. It's so fucking good. So I assume it's going to be a very long chapter type of thing. So it'll be like one chapter per reading. So I'm gonna this Wednesday I won't be able to read, so I'll be reading on Thursday instead, unfortunately, because usually I'll read on Wednesday, but Wednesday I have a lot of things to attend to. I need to bring my cat to the vet and all that, so I can't possibly do the reading on Wednesday. So
I need to put it on Thursday. So the next reading will be on Thursday. Tomorrow I'm not free. If tomorrow I'm free, I would have done it tomorrow, but I'm not free tomorrow, unfortunately. So yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. Bit watch the VOD from the beginning. It's a very good story. I don't think you want to miss it. Yeah, it's a very, 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 very good story. And to those who are in my channel right now, I'm not sure who you guys are. Or are you guys new to my channel? Um, I usually mostly just stream about reading stuff, reading books. I don't see a point of streaming me playing the game itself, because every time I do stream of me playing the game itself, it's either I feel like I have to put up a persona, like a streamer persona, to like interact with people, and then I get really tired after the stream, or that it's just not worth the effort because I don't get a lot of viewers out of my gameplay stream for Final Fantasy 14. Really, even when I'm raiding, sometimes Yakuza's. You thought of watching the movie? Which story have you? Before the coffee gets cold. There's a movie. I actually don't really. To be completely honest, I don't really care for that story that much. It's not definitely not one of my favorite stories. I actually gave the book to my friend already. I don't. It's her birthday recently, and we are both like books junkie, and she hasn't read it yet, and it's her birthday this month, and I gave it to her. So alongside with others give, of course, obviously. I'm not just gonna give her like a second-hand book for a birthday gift. But yeah, I'm not so crazy about that story. It's good, but it's like kind of meh for me. Yeah, but this one confession is really fucking good, so I really hope that you guys will continue listening to me read it in. Yeah. And I fucking love Arum. Arum's duck's the best, man. Seriously. I should use it more often. But I have like fucking 10,000 minions, so it's very hard for me to choose a minion sometimes. So, where's the duck? I don't even remember. It's not even in my favorite, because the fucking there's no fucking point. You just keep put like this little slot for favorites, man. Fucking hell. Where's the duck? I have too many. Yeah, there you go. And I love the duck bill as well. So because it slides around when you walk, it just slides. It's so fucking cute. Yeah, apparently there's a book 2 to that. But like I said, I'm not that interested to that story. So I don't have plans basically to continue before the coffee gets cold. It's I think it's because of the way it's written. It doesn't feel like a novel. It feels more like a screenplay or a stage play to me. So the writing style is not something that I like. I personally like. So I'm not definitely not interested in continuing. Yeah, it would be a waste of money for me to go buy the book, because yeah, because I really don't. I mean, it's not that I don't like the first book. It's just more like I don't really care for the book. Yeah, and I can't possibly buy so many books, because I have 1, 2, and 3 new books, like modern setting books. I have 3 modern setting books that I haven't read yet, and then I still have plans to go back to Natsume Soseki at some point. I still have plans to go back to Kazuo Ishiguro's bibliography as well. Yeah, I can't possibly. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop buying books for now because my bookshelf is already going to fall apart soon. So yeah. Yeah, too many dialogues. I don't like those with too many dialogues. I like those with monologues. Like just now, the whole thing is basically like a speech. Yeah, I like something like that or a monologue or something like Kazuo Ishiguro do, which is like a prose. Kazuo Ishiguro prose are really good. Yeah. But the problem with Before the Coffee Gets Cold is just it just feels like a stage play, and it makes sense because the writer is a playwright, so it makes complete sense. But at the same time, it's just not my cup of tea, my cup of coffee, I guess. So so yeah, I mean the story is alright, but it's just alright for me. It's not my top 10 or something like that. Have you guys watched, if it's still on the cinema for you guys, have you guys watched Everything Everywhere All at Once? If you haven't, please go and watch it. Seriously. I cannot emphasize how how important it is for you guys to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a fucking great movie. And I don't say that often for for modern movies. I'm a film snob. I usually just watch and rewatch old movies nonstop. And then the only time I watch something new is because Twisty suggested to me and all that. I think What We Do in the Shadows is coming out. New season or something? Wait, Westworld. Westworld is coming out. The fourth season, right? I should catch up on Westworld. There's very like little modern stuff that I watch. I'm also not a big fan of like science fiction stuff. I don't know. I like down to earth stuff, I guess you can say that. Grounding stuff. Our ducks are talking to each other. So cute. Okay guys, I gotta go grab lunch. I'm gonna die soon if I don't eat. No, I'm just kidding. I had a very big breakfast. But yeah, I'm gonna if nobody's claiming any quotes or poems, I'm going to pick a poem and end the stream. Let me see. I'm gonna pick a poem by Edward Thomas. Okay, the title of the poem is Gone, Gone Again by Edward Thomas. Gone, gone again, May, June, July, and August, gone again, gone by. Not memorable, save that I saw them go, as past the empty quays the rivers flow. And now again in the harvest rain the Blenheim oranges fall grubby from the trees, as when I was young, and when the lost one was here, and when the war began to turn young men to dung. Look at the old house, outmoded, dignified, dark and untenanted, with grass growing instead of the footsteps of life. The friendliness, the strife in its beds have lain, youth, love, age and pain. I am something like that, only I am not dead, still breathing and interested in the house that is not dark. I am something like that, not one pane to reflect the sun, for the schoolboys to throw at, they have broken every one.
That is all for today, and thank you for joining us for the first chapter of Confessions by Minato Kanae. Koku Haku. I'll see you guys again on Thursday. And I'll see you guys again on Thursday. Thank you so much for Noel, Ando, Aru, Magimi, and Bit in the stream. Space Chip is here. Thank you for being in the stream. Thank you, Twisty, for moderating. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm gonna go get lunch now. Bye bye. I'll drop by to one of your places one of these days. I don't like it when they like put like, you know, PF twice. You can just do it once, bruh. You don't have to be so desperate. It's okay. Oh, Kyle has a place to go AFK. I should go there. Where is it? 2341. Kyle is in Thornberry, right? Okay. 2341. 2341. I'm stupid when it comes to this. Alright, anyway. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys soon. Spoopy. Bit, watch the VOD. Bye! Have a smooth week ahead. I'll see you guys on Thursday.